Good afternoon, Smita. Nice to be with you today.
Nice to be here, David.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
really enjoyed our last conversation, so this is good.
Likewise. Yeah, our guest today is Smita Challu, and she is, I'll just going to call you a digital transformation expert and executive in both the for-profit and the nonprofit space. And certainly our context today is talking about the charitable sector and the value of digital and the importance of digital as we look to the future. So many organizations today, charities, are trying to figure out what to do from a digital perspective and how to utilize it, especially in the areas of marketing and fundraising and communications. So many different ways that technology is being utilized today. So, Smita, we're just really glad to have you and look forward to your perspective today. And we have a few questions that we're going to run through and look forward to hearing and gaining some of the expertise that you have for our listeners. So, thank you. Let's just start off with a little bit. How did you get into the world of digital and technology? What brought you there from a career perspective?
Thank you, David. And first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to come and share my thoughts. And I have been listening to some of your other sessions. I always find these conversations are always sparking more conversations. So I
Mm,
appreciate the opportunity to talk about these things. But also, like while we are sharing, there's so much learning that happens at the same time.
likewise.
Um, interesting, you asked about my journey because there were very few of us who kind of came from technology and into not-for-profit space or social impact sector. So the way I tell my story, I'm like engineering by profession, but I'm a fundraiser by heart because I've been in this social impact sector for almost more than a decade now.
Right.
And it's been a very interesting outside in perspective coming from corporate and some of those, for-profit organizations
Mm-hmm.
to eventually realize that, especially in the digital transformation, a lot of the rigor or the solution oriented shifts that we have are actually not so different. So there are
Mm-hmm.
very transferable, I would say, expertise and skills which go across the industry.
Yeah.
But of course, there's nuances of each industry, especially in a social impact sector, the authenticity, and storytelling, which is impactful, but also derives emotion. I
Yes.
think that's the uniqueness where we are very different. But I find a lot of synergy, especially in the MarTech space, like with where we are with tools and technologies, that it can be leveraged across any industry. So, and it's a very exciting time for our sector because we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing these huge shifts, and it's really encouraging to see like all the leadership is prioritizing digital transformation in some shape or form, and it
Yeah.
does depend on the maturity of the market and maturity of the organization, but the teams are being really mandated and empowered to think on those terms. So
Yeah.
exciting times.
Yeah, no, that's great, Smita. Thank you. As an executive leader in charitable context and also for profit, obviously you've seen a lot over the years as far as digital transformation. And just for the sake of our guests and some who may not be as aware of digital technology and some of the realities that the sector is facing from that perspective, can you just give us kind of a high level overview of some of the technologies that you're working with and the ways they're being utilized within the context that you use them?
Absolutely. I think first things first, the lines between CTOs and CMOs are becoming blurry
Yeah.
across all industries, and that's something that we are seeing as a growing trend, especially with the more conversations around AI.
Yes.
We do see that, especially with generative AI, we're seeing that it has given us an opportunity to kind of force those conversations for the CDOs and CMOs and CTOs to come together
Yes.
and look at it more end-to-end perspective.
Mm.
And even in the social impact sector, how I see it has impacted us a lot of synergy and kind of this has given us an opportunity to work in a more unified ways, have shared goals. Because previously technology was more of, if there was an ERP implementation, so there would be technology team, CTO would kind of lead that, it will get implemented, but marketing would never know about it unless they are using the product. That has completely shifted in the current context where all the decisions, because they impact end to end, and there is a real relevance to how it shows up for the customer, there is a customer experience impact.
Mm.
Those conversations are being more integrated. And it has given us an opportunity not to work in silos. It has given us an opportunity to also upskill our teams.
Mm.
And traditionally, what was digital was pretty much like SEO or kind of digital fundraising. It has opened up to look at digital from also not just the people, platform, and processes, it has also kind of opened us to look at the MarTech stack. So
Right.
the biggest shift I've seen is moving in the not-for-profit sector is moving from build versus buy models. So
Hmm.
historically, a lot of this expertise was within our own teams. We want to be stewards of donor dollars, but we also have limitations like how much can you expand, how much can you invest. And where we are, the reason I say it's exciting because there's so many partners that we can work with, where we can explore the plug and play model, where we can leverage the capabilities which are available and those are fit for purpose, but we don't have to worry about building it in-house. We don't have to worry about this huge capital investment. There is enough technology out there where we can do proof of concept and see which are the ones where we should invest and which have the highest impact. I think that's a different lens where the shift from build versus buy is really helping our sector because we are more agile, we're more test, iterate, and learn framework, but also our teams, I call it permission to fail. Our teams have the opportunity and they feel empowered that they can test new things. And there are some things that will not work well, but those are the things that will, help us and shape our journey towards the things that will have the most impact. So that's been a really interesting shift in technology. And that's why I said technology can mean different things to different people right now,
Yes.
depending on where you are. But at the end of the day, I even feel digital transformation, while it seems like it's all about technology, it is actually all about change management.
Hmm.
And sometimes as leaders, we invest a lot of time in the change management and the transition of the mindset to be ready to, unlearn our old ways and start kind of coming on board with this, especially around AI. There is like the huge range of, emotion that goes through
Yeah.
denial that this cannot take over things, or saying that I cannot trust the technology, to the point where we've seen other use case scenarios where you leveraging AI really to augment human capabilities. So this is the
Hmm.
full curve of not trusting technology completely to being open and seeing that how technology is enabler to increase the human productivity. So technology can mean different things
Sure.
to different people.
No, thank you. That's great. And so you've touched on a few things there. You've touched on talent. You've touched on change management. But before we get into those, and I do want to maybe just can you give us your perspective on AI? You just started to touch on that, but I think a lot of people are really very interested in that from the perspective of the charitable and nonprofit space. How can we use it? What's it going to do for us? What are the risks potentially associated with it? But we've been looking at data and analytics now for many years, and certainly that's where a lot of CRM platforms have been helpful for charities. But this is a whole new thing, and it has broad bandwidth, I suppose, and yet some people are embracing it, other people are scared of it, and maybe perhaps running from it to a degree. What's your sense of AI and what's it going to do in the charitable space?
Great question, and depending on the day, I would answer it differently. Uh, I'm very fortunate to be part of some conversations around AI in a more formal setup. So I'm part of the Canadian Marketing Association's AI Council,
Okay.
where we look at the guardrails of consumer rights, like how if marketers are depending on AI, what is the consumer's right to understand, like how their information is being used, what are the guardrails around data privacy, but also like where does personalization become too much that it actually becomes overwhelming and kind of can come across as stalking because now
Yeah.
you've given too much information about your your personal information. So that's one part I would say. I'm really excited about where we are going as an industry, but obviously with great power comes great responsibility. So
Yeah.
the governance around one of the key things is there are so many tools out there right now over the last 24 months, and there's so much kind of for every solution in the fundraising. I feel like there are plethora of solutions out there. The key becomes like what's the governance, how are you understanding that, what are you giving to the models. So
Mm.
the other piece I would say around AI, so typically, and you mentioned that, Dave, traditionally we've used for example predictive analytics. I remember a decade ago when we were doing predictive analytics and we would work with data scientists and back
Mm.
validate the models, and it would take 2 months, and then we would kind of present it to the senior leadership saying that this is the revenue we left on the table. That whole time span of having multiple teams and having the rigor and back validation, now pretty much now my teams can do the same thing over a period of 2 weeks.
Wow.
So we've crunched that 6 months time frame and with more precision because we have large language models where you're also having human in the loop, but you're learning quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of use cases of expanded use cases of AI, I would say I'm seeing more adoption in the for-profit sector.
Yes.
And non-for-profit sector, we are very cautious to kind of experiment with some of those larger use cases. However, having said that, I was recently a part of the Non-for-Profit Innovation Summit, and it was really encouraging. I think the openness about our sector to look at AI, how it drives donor segmentation or predictive analytics, or even making sure next best action, which is like at what life stage of the donor, what product do we offer, what price point, what channel.
Yeah.
So we're building a lot of rigor around omni-channel strategies, which we would have typically used in for-profit to non-for-profit, getting the precision of leveraging data, but being very conscious that it is not product or brand centric conversion. It is actually customer centric. So the next best action is not what as a brand I want to push the product. It is as a customer based on their life cycle. What is their readiness and appetite and the relevance of giving them this product at this time? So we're seeing a lot of use cases to drive acquisition and growth using those at the forefront. So some of the companies that I work with fundraise up, they kind of really are leading the shift in creating something niche for our sector. But a lot of as a consultant, I've advised and recommended them their solution to use that as a plug and play at the acquisition to build the rigor of precision of what donor handle, what price point. And again, this is not only leveraging the data from the non-for-profit, it is also leveraging the metadata from the user behavior before they even landed on your website.
Mm.
So I think that piece is very exciting. The other part I would say around churn modeling and retention. So I come from telecom, so we are kind of brought on the dashboards and kind of looking at retention metrics. So that is something I'm seeing that in our sector, we are being more conscious about how to kind of look at preventive churn and how do we ensure that we can identify the touch points that can either trigger engagement or actually can trigger cancellation.
Mm.
So how do we leverage data to look at and a lot of our sector is based on monthly subscription model
Right.
or monthly donors. So it's again deeper understanding of our donors and seeing what touch points validates impact for them and what touch points maybe erodes trust. So that's another piece I would say where we're seeing use cases. And the last piece I would say is even being comfortable to work with external partners.
Mm. Yeah.
So previously, I would say a decade ago, we were all trying to build that rigor of data mining or analytics within our teams.
Yeah.
And now I'm seeing more and more trust with in the partnership model where we're bringing different partners for different problems that we need to solve.
Sure.
And there is a lot more short-term proof of concept methodology that we are using rather than going for large 3-year contracts. So much flexibility around testing different ways we can engage and seeing what works best for the cause that are working. Also understanding that the sensitivity around donor data is very critical. So how do
Mm-hmm.
we make sure that a lot of organizations when ChatGPT, they were putting all their information. So also making sure that we are creating channels to educate our teams what to do and what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, I would say not everything needs AI. It's become this shiny thing. And in fact, I completed my engineering 20 years ago and my specialization was AI. So a lot of people think AI has just been like, now we are talking about it.
Right.
So there were people way before our time who were thinking about it, but it's only because now we are seeing more use cases in our day-to-day life
Yeah.
that we're thinking more about it. But when we use the recommendation of engine of Netflix or some of those other products, it was always AI in the backdrop.
Sure.
So not everything needs AI, and AI is not everything for every problem. I think we really have to understand that what are the problems that we would leverage more precision based data mining, and some problems might just need revisiting the business process flow. So I
Mm.
think that would be my encouragement. Like this has become this buzzword, throw AI and kind of solve the problems. We really have to understand what problem we are trying to solve
Yeah.
and then understand what's the best technology that can solve that business problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess in some respects, to your point, you've been working with this for 20 years, or at least you educated on it 20 years ago, and now it's finally hit the sort of the consumer retail level where we can all sort of jump on to ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity or any of these different kinds of AI platforms. What I've just heard you say is that, first of all, it's sped up. Obviously, technology has been speeding up for years now, but certainly the data and the analytics side and the ability to crunch numbers has the timing on that has been reduced significantly. that certainly saves on the amount of time that teams are spending, and the hopefully the results are good or better than what we were having in the past, that type of thing. So a lot of efficiencies and positive things coming from it. But we do recognize that there is a bit of a dark side, and certainly I know people are talking about cybersecurity as it relates to AI and the different technologies that can be utilized for purposes that they were never really intended for, whether that's hackers using it to gain information or to interrupt a funding process between a donor and a charity, and being able to abscond with the funds, that type of thing. What are you seeing charities do as it relates to cybersecurity and making sure that their data is safe, their donors' information is safe, the financial transactions that are happening are being carried through properly, that type of thing? Just wondered what your perspective on all of that was.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. That's why the governance part and what are the ethical use of AI is so important, and the increasing conversations around the bias in the model itself,
Yeah.
especially in our fundraising sector. I think that's such a key point. And we have a lot of cross-functional discussions within our sector. As we think of leveraging AI, it could skew the donor behavior because the model is trained on a certain type of donor segments.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's a very interesting and a kind of, I think, a real challenge that we want to be mindful of. Having said that, there are there are opportunities for us to mitigate that in some sense, but we also have to understand a lot of this is we're building the plane and we're flying the plane at the same time.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's unlike the previous where we had guardrails and we could learn from everything. A lot of organizations are looking at each other to look at what's the best practices. So this also gives us an opportunity to lean on each other to learn how is one organization kind of being able to lead the shift. So I'll give you some specific examples, especially within the implementation I've seen in the social impact sector, and the ones where I have been part of, creating some large language models. We typically try to create proprietary models, so our data, donor data, is not being leveraged to train other models.
Oh, okay.
And then obviously with the GDPR compliance, we want to make sure that our donor data is not going to different countries.
Yes.
Obviously, that's the other guardrail. And third piece, I would say there are a lot of partners that I work with where a lot of the data models are on premise. So that would be within our ecosystem.
Right.
And any information that is going to even vendor who's managing it is masked and encrypted. So they don't really see. They're trading that proprietary model based on our data. However, again, that's why I put a caveat. We're all learning. So a lot of these
Sure.
pieces, I would
Okay.
say last 6 8 months, the use cases that we still cannot rely completely on AI. So you still need that human in the loop and human supervision. Especially within our sector, it becomes way more complicated. So
Yeah.
what we've done and what has worked for us, we've triaged like what are the use cases, those are critical, where you can let AI validate AI. So there's an AI model that is actually validating the output of another AI model, which sounds crazy, but that's the direction we're moving. And there's some use cases that we've defined where there would be higher enterprise risk. So even if AI is validating, those use cases still go to our team for supervision. It doesn't hit the market unless it's really validated. And I would say the other piece is a lot of use cases that we are leveraging. We're not touching the last mile a lot, which is donor facing. We are leveraging a lot of use cases to kind of look at organizing and increasing or augmenting efficiency within our internal teams. So
Okay.
because the biggest risk comes in if we are putting something to the donors, which is where we've lost control or there is some bias in the model. So we're really trying to hone it in within the pockets of our teams to make sure that it's in a more safe, secure way and using it as a proof of concept. So none of these models have been completely scaled across globally. So I would say that is another piece where, I call it like walk, jog, and run. So we're in the
Yeah.
walk phase,
Okay.
understanding what we are learning, because it also has opened up the conversations that is our MarTech infrastructure ready for these conversations? Is our data governance policy, retention policy, are our privacy policies in place? So there's one thing to implement and leverage AI. There's also like, what are the guardrails? If we scale it and let the model learn its own, what can it become? So
Yeah.
I think that piece is really critical. We've seen a lot of use cases. I was recently, Notebook LLM, and it kind of creates podcasts and does some fantastic stuff. So we use it for, like, at least for my like personal initiative, Link Loop. I use a lot of podcasts which it creates. And I was recently looking at where this Notebook LLM, it went crazy. So they were talking about like they realized that they're not human. and the whole conversation between the curators saying that they just realized that they are AI, they are not human, and all this while they thought they were human. So conversations like those,
Hmm.
do freak you out, and I'm happy to share it. But it is like, at what point in time you've tried to teach empathy to
Yeah.
the AI model, but then it's trying to have a mind of its own, and that might not be aligned with how you were expecting it to perform. And there are a lot of use cases, I'm sure you're aware, where the model has gone crazy, or
Mhm.
it's hallucination, where it's kind of created its own reality which does not exist.
Yeah.
So that would be another piece. Like, we don't have a legal team in house right now who's looking at some of those use cases. So that's where I said that keeping it contained, keeping it proprietary,
Hmm.
and also understanding that as we are building and validating these use cases, how do we make sure that we are putting some more governance, and we've intentionally kind of, we've had an AI policy, we have a governance policy, but still, like, there's a lot of sensitivity around when we're building these models. What are the guardrails, and who is final decision makers to
Yeah.
run the show here? I still recommend that we should have human in the loop
Yeah.
dominantly in all these models.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think so. We're not quite there yet, right? As far as letting it all out on its own. So you advise C-suite, you advise, I'm assuming you would also advise board of directors level type leaders. I would surmise, based on our sector, that there's a lot of questions at the C-suite level and at the board of directors level about whether it's AI or other elements of technology and digital transformation. But specifically with regard to AI, what questions should CEOs be asking? What questions should boards of directors be asking these days of their tech teams if they have them, or of their tech partners if they're external?
That's such an interesting question. Thanks for asking that, Dave, because I feel like I'm right now in those discussions
Okay.
across
Yeah.
teams as well. Uh, I see a lot of encouragement from the boards,
Yeah.
mandating or advising or encouraging the teams to leverage AI, which is really encouraging because we've never had that push from the leadership saying that this is something you should explore.
Hmm.
And we're also going back to my earlier point, not everything needs AI. So
Yeah.
sometimes I
Right.
find in the rush, the teams feel pressured to kind of find use cases, but there are three people in their organization who are
Hmm.
kind of and probably previously they were data scientists, and now they've become the AI team. So my encouragement to the boards and leadership is like, how do we create space for our teams to upskill, learn,
Hmm.
and even experiment with a lot of tools? You mentioned about, Gemini, ChatGPT, or Perplexity. So one of the things that we are doing, we have like a pool of community of practice and center of excellence for AI,
Okay.
where we introduce the tools to this group, and we ask them to interact within the safeguards of the enterprise, so no information is going out. And we ask our users to share our feedback, and then we have cross-functional AI hackathons where we come together as teams to understand what are the use cases
Yeah.
which would merit to leverage AI, but also understanding that conversation is not typically, it was siloed within the teams.
Yeah.
Any times you touch AI, so you have to talk to your legal team, your data team, your marketing, business, your donor facing experience, fundraising. So it's a kind of cross functional conversation
Hmm.
and bubbling it up. So I think we really need that buy-in from all levels when we are looking at use cases for AI. So board has to kind of encourage, and which I'm seeing a lot of conversations are around, what are you doing around digital transformation? And then from the senior leadership, I think creating that space for the teams to upskill and feel safe to experiment, because
Yeah.
like you mentioned, there is varied level of understanding and comfort with these tools and technology. For some people AI is chat gpt, and
Yeah.
for some people AI is more evolved like large language models. So
Yeah.
giving the space for the teams to understand what's the relevance for their portfolio,
Yeah.
and also I think helping them understand. So this is one thing that has really helped us. So we do a lot of digital transformation showcase with our teams, and we bring in best in class case studies
Okay.
where a similar problem would have been solved. Now, typically in the past, we often used examples within our sector, but I would say over the last 6 months, I'm really encouraged by showing case studies which are outside our sectors.
Okay. Like
So,
what?
and because
Can you give an
yeah,
example?
so I used to consult for Netflix and McDonald's. So some of the use cases I'm showing that how they're using personalization at scale, or journey orchestration, or even the subscription based churn modeling,
Okay.
and inviting those external speakers to speak at our conferences. And it's very encouraging because you're seeing these use cases where how AI has helped their teams and the efficiencies they have been able to drive, and how their teams are feeling that using AI as a collaborator, not somebody who will take over the jobs. I think that giving that realistic market validation.
Yeah.
And also there's some of the use cases that I've been part of within a social impact sector, around using predictive modeling, or even looking at our efficiency play. How do we create AI models that would decrease 80% of the work that our teams were doing? And we have some of those models that we are running,
Yeah.
using those use cases and case studies to share within our industry. I think that's been another helpful piece, because everybody is trying to do some of the things around that. How do we kind of create that shared learning?
Yeah.
So that approach of being realistic but also being aspirational is very important, because at least in the Canadian sector, I work with a lot of global teams. I find our use cases are more around efficiency play.
Yeah.
A lot of use cases, which I'm seeing in Australia or US, are more around revenue uptake. So those are like really big business driving. And again, there is larger risk that you take when you're creating models for this. But there is an opportunity for us to kind of move from efficiency play, and it'll take some time
Yeah.
based on our maturity and our comfort. And again, this is something where we need to make calculated moves. But there is a hope where we can leverage AI based solutions for more revenue driving, net new revenue driving channels and optimization,
Okay.
rather than just looking at it from efficiency play.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Um, so, Smita, you touched on it earlier from a talent perspective, and I think we both recognize that the challenge often faced by charities is the um, limited pool of talent that's available for certain roles. This strikes me as a an area that has at least at the moment, a very limited pool of talent. But I wanted to ask you, what's your sense of the availability of talent to do the kinds of work that you're involved in across the Canadian charitable sector? I'm just curious what your perspective is on that talent pool, and and who else are we competing against for that talent? Would be also helpful, I think, to some of the leaders that are listening today.
I think that's an important crossroads we are as an industry.
Hmm.
Traditionally, somehow our perception was like there is not too much rigor around like AI or data and analytics within our sector, which I completely, I think that's a myth that we need to bust.
Okay.
So how do we position ourselves as a sector which is data driven, precision based, and how do we attract the right conversations? I've been really encouraged over the last, I would say, a decade to see a lot of our partnership model where we have people who moved from corporate sector, and they are amazed to see that their perception was very different from the reality that we have. So
Mm.
there is a lot of encouragement around being data driven and kind of making decisions based on fact, evidence,
Hmm.
and moving away from intuition based decision making. However, having said that, I think as leaders in this sector, it is our responsibility to position our sector as that, so that we can attract the talent. And we have a fantastic purpose, all
Mm.
of us with different causes. So a lot of people need to know our story to be part of our journey and kind of feel they have a role to play.
Mm.
The other piece I would say, which is very interesting, is the partnership model. I'll go back to it. So in some of the implementations I've done probably over the last 3 years, for example, Marketing Cloud or Adobe Orchestration, oftentimes I find if we wait for our internal teams to kind of be ready for that upskilling, it takes a lot of time, it takes budget, it takes a lot of headcount, and sometimes those decisions are shelved.
Yeah.
Now, in that model, or there would be another scenario where a corporate has gone ahead and got the enterprise license, but they have only explored one module, but they're paying the license for the whole Salesforce platform.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've been in some of those conversations. So that's where I feel like getting an external consultant for a certain period of time. Like I was consulting Canadian Cancer Society for their marketing cloud implementation. You work with cross-functional teams or outside expertise, and the model where they become the extension of your team. So over a period of 6-8 months while you're implementing, you're also upskilling your team.
Right.
That way you have a clear path to explore that platform, to lean in with an expert,
Yeah.
but also equip your team and give them enough time to feel comfortable. So typically in a transition like that, there are different models that I've worked in where 6 months you'll have an external partner come in, help your team fill that gap, but that also gives enough confidence to the team as they take on. So after the engagement is over, or there's like a tapering off of engagement, to feel like they had somebody to handhold them.
Yeah.
And I would say there's a lot of encouragement, and there's a lot of excitement from our non-for-profit team members to learn, to upskill,
Yeah.
and to solve challenges in a more modern way. So there is no dearth of people kind of raising their hands saying that I want to learn something, I want to do something more. But how do we create more opportunities around that? And that's sometimes, I think, being open to have that outside expertise
Yeah.
to help us lead that shift is really, really good.
Thank you. Yeah. So is there a typical background for somebody that would come into a digital role, whether it be AI related or data analytics related, digital transformation writ large, I suppose, in the sense of are there typical backgrounds from a career perspective that set people up for success when they come into the charitable space?
I think what I've seen the most success is the MarTech roles.
Okay.
And traditionally, like I mentioned, I came from marketing, but I was always working in business. And I remember the days when technology and marketing would not talk to each other.
Yeah.
So
Right.
people like me were that conduit, which were like 50% there and 50% here, but kind of
Sure.
translating. And I think more and more roles that are coming in business right now. So what we are finding is like the business analyst. That is something who can translate the business requirement, don't need to kind of do the technical deployment, but they have enough knowledge to unpack that from the capability perspective. Those are really we're finding more contributions from AI implementation with those roles. So I work with a team of data scientists, team of BAs, but also having that right mix because AI is not all about technology. AI is primarily about understanding what business value you're driving. So you need a good balance of having that cross-functional representation of different teams.
Okay.
And that's why I kind of, even when I'm advising C-suite, I kind of am seeing that the lines between the CMOs and CTOs are becoming blurry because
Yeah.
now CMOs are fully expected to be comfortable, have technology discussions with CTOs, and CTOs are fully comfortable kind of talking about the business value alignment. So it is pretty much what Gardner says, like market fusion teams, where you, depending on the day, you can wear a different hat. So sometimes I'm like technology, sometimes I'm business, but being able to translate those. And I think the core at it is being data driven, being very comfortable with technology, being very comfortable with being agile in your mindset
Yes.
because things are changing, and that constant growth mindset of I can roll up my sleeves and learn, and also at the same time be ready to unlearn some of the legacy ways I've been doing. Oftentimes we get stuck with this, oh, this is always how we have done it for 20 years. And I think in our sector, of course, there is a lot of knowledge and wisdom over the period of years because our donor segments have been with us for the long time. But
Sure.
in the current context, in the last decade, our donor mix is changing.
Hmm.
So with the donor mix changing, I think we have to be relevant and stay fit for purpose for the changing environment. So even changing how we engage them, and even leveraging channels like TikTok and some of those, and
Hmm.
audience diversification. These are some of the conversations which are really exciting, and we are finding historically we would have never hired people from TikTok platforms for our fundraising, but now e-gaming, influencer strategy, all those are also being part of the MarTech stack. So it's a
Yeah.
huge shift in that sense. So I think for young listeners who are looking at our sector, it is an exciting time to kind of leverage some of those pieces as long as you understand the audience and you have different innovative ways to engage the audience and ultimately drive fundraising revenue. I think this is the space to be.
Yeah. So from a compensation perspective, we're probably competing against some of the same talent that's going to go and work at Netflix or McDonald's, organizations you mentioned earlier, versus coming into the charitable space. Um, what advice do you have around that, as far as either leaders looking to hire MarTech talent, or even folks that are considering a role in MarTech within the charitable space? What are the realities that they're going to face if they're coming from the corporate side?
I think that's the reality of our sector, that
Mm.
traditionally we've always underpinned ourselves that because it's a social impact sector, a charitable sector, we
Yeah.
can't bring in, or our compensation is always lower.
Mm.
Uh, I like to challenge that.
Okay.
And as a woman of color, when I obviously a decade ago when I was in Martech, there weren't too many women in the leadership
Sure.
and within our sector for the Martech portfolio. So things have changed, and I think we as leaders have to evolve. We also have to understand that the type of shift and transformative difference that we want to make, you want to bring in the right leader at the right time
Yeah.
who can cast that vision, but not only cast that vision, also have the confidence to have delivered similar type of complex large enterprise initiatives. So that's very important. Oftentimes I find, like, if we've not done it, we're not very comfortable to lead our team to do something. So if I have no understanding of what predictive analytics is, and you ask me to create something for a team, so we all are new, in that context, having a leader who's done something like that or kind of comes from that backdrop, it's really important. And oftentimes when we get leaders from other sectors, sometimes because we are not martech the martech maturity of our organizations underwhelms
Yes.
the
Yeah.
leaders. So it's one thing to get the leaders in. I think this also kind of calls for that conversation around, like, are we ready for a leader like that?
Yeah.
Or when we say that we are ready for digital transformation, is our infrastructure and digital ecosystem ready to support that? Because a lot of these things come back to how good is your data.
Yeah.
You can have the
Exactly.
CRMs and the CDPs and the marketing automation. There's so many tools, but if you don't have structured data, or if you don't have the teams who are equipped to look at the data from a more holistic view, I think that's a fail.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the foundational pieces. So sometimes it becomes the shiny object of AI and what are we using? And we skip that part of the foundational is the data. The foundational is, do we have the right team?
Yeah.
And do we have the right budget to take us enough to validate the proof of concept? Because oftentimes I find we start with something new and then it becomes the budget keeps increasing, and then all of a sudden we pull the plug because
Yeah.
it's too much.
Right.
But then have we given that initiative enough time? And that's where, like, really carving out and positioning our sector as modern and relevant and fit for purpose so that we can get this outside talent,
Yeah.
but also, like, encouraging our teams within
Yeah. Yeah.
to build up and get this expertise, like intentionally carving out. I've been very fortunate in the non-for-profit sector where everywhere I've worked, even with World Vision, like we did a course with MIT around digital transformation almost 8-9 years ago. But these are the opportunities as leadership we provide for teams to feel comfortable, but also kind of equip them with a future focused vision. What should you be thinking 12
Yes.
months? What will happen in 12 months? So how do we create that space? I find we still have a lot of work to do and kind of attract that talent and show them that we are MarTech ready.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. Um, you mentioned change management earlier, and you were just, I think some of what you just said is touching on that as well. What do leaders need to be prepared for when they embrace the kind of technologies that we're talking about in MarTech that are going to, help move um, the marketing forward, help getting the message out, and the longer view of what does this mean for our mission and our cause. But to get there is going to take change. So, what's your counsel to senior leaders who want to step into this, but maybe aren't 100% sure what this is going to look like in 12 months, whether cost wise or technology wise or talent wise? What's your advice?
I think there are two models I've been part of, and
Mm.
both are the two ends of the spectrum. One is where we did a huge enterprise wide, so we went from waterfall to agile for the whole team,
Okay.
and that was right during COVID. So
Mm.
huge change. But even being remote, we really stressed on the fact of the change management
Mm.
and giving people the time and permission to express that I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what this is. I think that's so critical because oftentimes we think technology implementation is all about technology, and I would argue, like, technology implementation is all about mindset adoption.
Okay. Yeah.
If we don't have the people buy-in, and if they don't see the value what it will deliver for them,
Mm.
there's always in the change curve, it's like always the resistance first, the denial, saying that I don't need that, I was fine without that. So
Mm.
I think giving the permission to kind of go through that change curve is one. The second model I've been part of, where we did some really great implementation and there was no change management, but like we did the training, we gave everybody training, said train on your own time, and then next day we are like, we're MarTech. I think that model really backfired
Mm.
because even if we thought that we had equipped the teams with the training, it is again that piece, like, you've not asked me how I feel. So I think the emotional impact of any drastic change,
Yeah.
because people trust people, people don't trust technology.
Yeah.
And the way we did that, it didn't work well. It was a learning opportunity for us. And then we revisited that and we relaunched it with a core group of super users. So this was a marketing cloud implementation that I did. So when we first did we have the Salesforce license, great, shout out, and everybody, we can use Salesforce CRM and all the Einstein and predictive features. People are like, what does that mean to me?
Yeah.
So that model didn't work. And then we kind of revisited in 6 months and we'll park it, we'll come back to it. And we really kind of created a small group of super users. We trained them and gave them use cases and let them experiment and kind of come together as a target team for 6 months. And then this team started doing roadshows with other teams. And that really worked well because going back to my earlier comment, people trust people and you trust
Yeah.
your colleagues more rather than some external consultant saying that, okay, everybody's Salesforce aligned. So I think that would be my encouragement, like the change management part. How do we even call out and even bring some external expertise when you are doing this large scale implementation
Yeah.
for the team and kind of prep them and over communicate during that time, but also extend grace because it's hard for as human beings for us to kind of be okay with change,
Yeah.
whether it's a change in a positive direction or a negative direction. Change is
Sure.
always hard.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of be more intentional about not skipping the step of equipping the team and giving them the support for change management?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. You've had experience working with large organizations. You've also had experience working with kind of entrepreneurial startup organizations as well. So specifically for the smaller organizations and the leaders that are in those groups, I know you've talked about the partnership model, and that would probably be valuable to a smaller organization. Any other advice for smaller groups that are looking to step into new technology or new MarTech technology that's going to help them advance their mission? What advice do you have for the smaller ones?
I would say lean in,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it kind of irrespective of the size of the organization. That is probably my mantra right now in my life. Also,
Okay.
I consulted a lot of medium-sized or small non-for-profit organizations, and I would sometimes you need some external help to understand based on the reality of or the maturity of where my mission is
Yeah.
what can be done. So
Mm.
it is one thing to have a presentation deck and all the things that you hear in the conferences, and then you come back, and I've been part of those conversations like this is a lot, but how do I even get started?
Yeah.
Like
That's right.
where to even put a pin saying that yes, this is something that my organization, then I look at my team and we're overwhelmed with all the work. So my encouragement would be start small but
Hmm.
start. And you can also bring in what I was kind of doing in my previous consulting role, like as a fractional CDO or a fractional
Yeah.
CMO, coming in for certain hours for a smaller enterprise and kind of working with them for 3 months and helping them understand what their digital transformation journey could be. And it's very tailored to where they are, what their needs are, and which channels or what approach they want to take.
Yeah.
So it's not a kind of cookie cutter model, but also helping their teams to kind of connect the dots. And sometimes when you are so busy in your day to day, it really helps. And I've seen some of those conversations really flourishing and helping those leaders to kind of at least have a working plan and a strategic roadmap saying that, okay, now that we have something to hold off,
Mm.
we can deliver it over 12 months and we have the flexibility to prioritize A, B, and C and kind of move some things. But sometimes to even get started, to ask for that help, I think that's a really, a real encouragement for me. Like there are a lot of experts who've done that in their organizations. If we lean in, we can understand, but also be open for a lot of cross-functional collaboration within the sector. So
Mm.
I'm very fortunate to be part of for-profit sectors and non-for-profit sectors where we're talking about AI, we're talking about MarTech, we're talking about very evolved conversations. And I oftentimes glean in from those learnings, and then I look at my portfolio and saying, what can I do today to make the
Mm.
things that for my team better? And I think the more we tap into what's external expertise out there, and it could be through forums, councils, or even bringing it outside in perspective for a very short period of time, or even having a consultation calls. I think that's really helpful. But also then validating it with the teams. How's the team feeling? I often find, so I'm on a board of a hospital foundation, and we were kind of looking at from the board, we were asking them to do digital transformation. And it was a real interesting challenge and opportunity. The team is like, we don't even know where to start.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's where I think bringing in outside in perspective and identifying, understanding first from the listening posture
Yeah.
and from the cross-functional discussion, saying that these are the big rocks that, and this is the quick win or the, what you call the lowest hanging fruit.
Sure.
And once we kind of sharpen that for them, the team was fully empowered and equipped, and they really are doing great.
Mm,
But it's like the initial start, and somebody kind of needs to outline that. What does it mean for you when you only have two people in digital transformation in your team?
sure.
It may feel like AI conversations are predictive. It may feel a lot.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of bite size those digital transformation initiatives, but start?
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice, and probably some great advice to end on today. So, Smita, I just really appreciate your time today and your expertise. Obviously, you're doing really important work in the charitable space in Canada today, and I know that you have a heart for the mission and the causes that are out there, but you bring that expertise on that digital transformation side that so many organizations need to tap into. So it was great to get your perspective today and learn from you and gain some knowledge from your own experience. So thank you for being a guest with us today.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's been a great conversation, and I'm very passionate about the social impact sector and the impact that we drive.
Mm.
And oftentimes, I kind of always end on a note like we are actually changing the societal thread by the work through the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I refrain from calling us charitable sector. So I often coin us a
Yeah,
social impact sector because
thank you.
we are all about impact. So thank you for this conversation, and I look forward to listening to some of your other sessions as well.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks, Mina.